Chernobyl disaster. One of the biggest nuclear accidents ever recorded in history happened on the 25 and 26 of April 1986. About 8.4 million people were affected by nuclear radiation, including 600,000 who were part of the blast firefighting and clean-up operations. The power plant had suffered a power surge during a capacity test. The cooling system stopped working, which generated an overheating of the core, which reached very hot temperatures. The heat triggered a steam explosion so violent that it destroyed the roof of the reactor, which weighed more than 1,000 tons. A 1-kilometer-tall mushroom cloud blew fragments of graphite with plutonium into the air at enormous temperature. In contact with the air, the uranium caught fire and was also released into the atmosphere. The first firefighters, workers and journalists to arrive at the scene were exposed to lethal doses of radiation and were the first victims of Chernobyl. The fire released large amounts of radioactive material from the core into the air. If not contained, the radioactive fallout would be 100 times greater than the combined force of the 2 atomic bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Japan. The area around Chernobyl has turned into a red forest because of the dead trees. Immediately after the explosion, this area received the highest radiation doses. The pine trees died instantly and all the leaves turned red. Few animals survived the high levels of radiation. Animal and plant species that inhabit the region are torn apart by diseases caused by radiation. To this day, it is unclear what caused the Chernobyl tragedy. Some say that the reactor failed. Some argue that it was human error. A third group guarantees that it was a bit of both. After the accident, the government created an exclusion zone within a radius of 30 kilometers around the reactor that exploded, affecting the city of Chernobyl and small communities. The Soviet Union tried to crack down on the accident until radiation was detected in Eastern Europe and the UK. Residents were evacuated from the region with a fatal delay of 36 hours. The radioactive cloud reached 9 million people. There was a widespread increase in cases of cancer and respiratory diseases in the population of Ukraine. That year, 8,000 people. A decade after the accident, the death toll reached 125,000 people. This entire area has been abandoned and will become uninhabitable for humans for thousands of years. Three Mile Island accident. The 3 Mile Island nuclear accident is an accident that occurred at the 3 Mile Island nuclear power plant, Pennsylvania, United States, on March 28, 1979. The power plant's TMI-2 nuclear reactors suffered a partial melting of its core, 1 year after the unit was commissioned. At the time, it was the worst nuclear accident in U.S. history. 30,000 people residing in the surroundings of the nuclear plant, distributed in a radius of 8 kilometers, were exposed to certain levels of radioactivity, although the effects of the radiation are very small. However, Greenpeace carried out parallel studies that held that cancer and leukemia cases had risen sharply in the area near the nuclear power plant. The cause of the 3 Mile Island accident was a failure in the plant's primary circuit cooling. At around 4 a.m., the circuit responsible for supplying water to the steam turbines was supplied, which caused the primary circuit's cooling circuit to stop working. The superheat produced in the reactor core led to an increase in pressure in the primary circuit. This pushed for the introduction of project control pressures to automatically shut down the nuclear reactor. After the nuclear accident at 3 Mile Island, 13 years of work were found to complete the recovery of Unit 2. The works prepared in August 1979 and ended in December 1993, 3 years after the completion of the Prepared Area Recovery Plan. There are currently no on-site operations, just surveillance and maintenance. The decommissioning of Unit 1 was scheduled for 2014 at the end of 40 years of activity. But already in 2009, the NRC, in agreement with the plant operator, decided to postpone it to 2034, 55 years after the accident in Unit 2. Fukushima disaster. On March 11, 2011, the northwest coast of Japan suffered an 8.9 magnitude earthquake and sequentially a tsunami. With the effects of these catastrophes, another worse tragedy ended up brewing: the Fukushima nuclear accident. The plant had 6 reactors, but at that time only reactors 1, 2 and 3 were working. Due to the earthquake, explosions, overheating and the ensuing tsunami caused the diesel engine system to also stop working, causing a very serious accident. Radioactive particles contaminated more than 1,000 square kilometers, and more than 160,000 residents had to leave the region. More than 18,000 people died. 10 years later, the visible signs of the catastrophe are fading. Across the 20-kilometer area around the nuclear facility, tractors and cranes are demolishing many buildings and houses that have become uninhabitable due to earthquakes and contamination. The mountains of decontamination, rubble bags that have stained the landscape for years, have largely been removed. Although all evacuation orders for the 20-kilometer zone around the nuclear facility have been withdrawn. Large parts of the cities directly adjacent to the power plants and the villages to the northwest are still heavily contaminated, totaling an area of nearly 340 square kilometers. There, radioactivity is at least 50 times above the standard limit of a millisievert. So far, only small decontaminated special economic zones have been created in these cities, with a view to later repopulation.